Hey everybody, welcome to Thompson Queen's Kitchen. I'm going to be making my homemade chicken pie, so let's get started. We're going to first start by washing our chicken. I have a organic market side whole chicken here, and I'm going to wash it with some cold water. Then I'm going to take my extra virgin olive oil, pour it all over my chicken so my seasonings stick. I'm going to use some sazon, Goya seasoning. If you don't have any of that, you should run to your store and grab you some sazon, okay? Because sazon is the best type of seasoning you can get. Not sponsored. Get you some sazon though. You can use it on salads, meats, chicken, everything, vegetables, everything. I'm going to use some Lowry seasoning salt. Do not be stingy with the seasoning salt. This is a whole chicken. Well, don't be stingy with any of the seasonings because this is a whole chicken. I've got some New Orleans Cajun seasoning by Weber. Use any type of seasonings you prefer or like. I'm just using these because they're quick to grab in my home and my family likes them. Then I'm gonna grab some Louisiana Cajun fiery seasoning. So kind of the same as the Weber New Orleans seasoning, just so slightly different. This one's got a little bit more texture in the seasoning, I would say. Then you gonna run to the store and definitely get you some Badia Complete, okay, by Sazon. The best thing, you're gonna want to season the other side of your chicken that you have not already seasoned. Once you're done with that, you're gonna sear your chicken. Once you sear your chicken, you're gonna want to start cutting some onion for your homemade chicken broth that you will be making. You're gonna want to dice your onions in pretty big pieces. While you do this, while you are cutting your onion, your chicken should be searing. I sear my chicken for 30 minutes. Half of 30 minutes I do on each side for my chicken. So as you can see right now, I'm dicing my onions up in pretty big, fairly decent sizes. This onion is going to go into a pot of water that you're going to make homemade chicken broth in. There's my pot right there. I'm going to put my onion that I've diced up in my pot. Once you dice your onion up, you're going to put some water in that pot. I used spring water. Once I put my spring water in, I am going to use my seasonings that I used to season my chicken with. I'm going to pour some of the same seasonings that I used my chicken in my pot for my water. The onions were bothering my eyes there, so I had to, step back and collect my tears because I'm a thug and I don't cry. Once I got done dicing those, I put those in my pot. Once you add your onion, I'm grabbing my water and my seasonings. Oh, I put some olive oil in. Same exact seasonings I seasoned my chicken with, you want to put in your pot. After I added my water in my pot with my onion and my seasoning, now I'm going to flip my chicken to the other side that I have not seared. This is what your chicken should look like once one side is seared. Once I've seared that side, I'm going to go over a pot of water and stir that. This pot consists of onion, your chicken seasonings, and water. Once you're done stirring your water with your onions, your seared chicken should look like this. Once this is done, you should take your excess butter that you seared your chicken in and pour it into your chicken broth. Stir that up. Use a big enough pot that'll fit your whole chicken. Once this is done, bring that whole chicken to a boil. Once it's boiling, turn the heat down to a slight boil and put a lid over it, and continue to watch your chicken for about 45 minutes. After this, I put it in for another 25 minutes, flipping it around to the other side. This is me just putting some water over the part of the chicken that's not covered. Once your chicken is done and you pull your whole chicken out of this water, you should have homemade chicken broth. This is what your broth should look like once you pull out your chicken. Once you pull out your chicken, you can then shred your whole chicken and put it in a bowl to preserve once you make your pie crust. Onto the pie crust. This is the most simplest pie crust that you could make. You're going to start with 1 1/4 cup of flour, only 1 1/4 cup. This flour is extremely easy. You only need 3 ingredients: your flour, frozen butter, and extremely cold water. Like I said, you only need 1 1/4 cup of flour for how many balls of dough you are going to make. So in this case, I'm going to make 2, 1 for my bottom, 1 for my top layer of my pie. So I'm using 1 1/4 cup of flour. Make sure you freeze your butter. The reason you need frozen butter is because that will keep the dough from unthawing while also keeping its form. So when you level your pie crust out to fit your pan, it's nice and soft and pretty and versatile. So if anything happens, you can fix it like a rip occurs in your pie crust. It will be easy to fix with this type of recipe. So dump that into your bowl. Once you've added your frozen butter, then what you're going to do is you're going to take a measuring cup that is 1/4 and add 1/4 cup of cold water into your 1 1/4 cup of flour, your 1 stick of butter, and 1/4 cup of water. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take your hands or your pastry cutter, and you're going to want to cut through the flour and the butter, molding it together. Once this all comes together, your dough should stop looking white and it should start looking like a mixture of butter and flour. So the consistency will start to get a little bit of like ball-y consistency. As you can see in the video, it starts to clump together and the flour and the butter kind of form together to create crumbles. Once your flour and butter are like a flour butter crumble, you're going to take your hands and knead it. Right now I'm still crushing the butter, frozen butter and the flour together. It might seem like there's not enough water or butter, but trust me, there is. Once you start kneading it, that frozen butter will start to melt a little bit. That's why you also need to use frozen butter. If you don't use frozen butter, all your dough is going to be is like melted butter. And it doesn't incorporate good together. Now you kind of see the consistency of my flour. I'm going to start kneading it together. I'm going to use a pretty good amount of force, but not too much, or it'll knead it. It'll overwork the dough, and then your dough won't be incorporated good. It won't be soft, and it'll be very hard and just not a good product. So knead your dough. You could do this in a bowl. You could do this on top of your counter with extra flour. It doesn't matter however you knead your dough. Just knead it until it's all incorporated together. Once that's done, you're going to do the same thing again, the same measurements, doing the same exact steps as you did the first time, doing this another time for your second layer of dough. You need a bottom layer of crust and a top layer for your chicken pie. This is what your chicken pie should look like when it's done kneading. Once this is done and you've finished both pie crusts, now roll them into balls and cover a flat surface. Once you cover a flat surface with some flour, grab your dough and put some flour on the surface of your dough. Spray your pie pan so your pie crust does not stick. And start rolling out your dough to whatever size you prefer, whether they are miniature pies, big pie, it does not matter. Like I said, this dough can literally continue to roll out to as big as you want it to get or as small as you want it to get. Like I said, this dough is very, very, very versatile. It's extremely soft, extremely crispy, extremely moist once you cook it. It's a very good recipe to use for Thanksgiving. If you want a sweet pie, all you have to do is just add sugar to your flour. That's it. If you want like a savory pie, just don't add the sugar like I am doing right now. So right now I'm just measuring it out to how I like it. I kind of want it a little bit bigger than my pie pan, just so I can, make sure that it's big enough and that both sets of my pie crust touch each other for when I put it in the oven and I make a design around the pie crust. So I'm rolling it. After I roll my pie crust out, I'm going to line it in my pie pan, and as you see, I have no tears, no rips in my pie crust. It's very soft, and it pretty much is doing everything I'm telling it to do. It's giving me no issues. So then, once I do that, I poke some holes into my pie crust so I don't get my pie crust airy bubbles in them. Usually if you don't poke holes into your pie crust, air will trap in and it doesn't cook very good. So poke some holes at the bottom of your pie crust. Once this is done, I'm going to add my shredded chicken that I took out of our homemade chicken broth and add that into the bottom of the pie crust. After I'm done with that, I'm then going to roll out my other pie crust. Once I'm done rolling out my other pie crust, I put together the sides of both pie pieces and I start to decorate it. All I do here is just pinch my two fingers together and make that little tiny design. Not pretty, but that's all I know how to do. Or you can use a fork. I don't really like the fork method, but you can use a fork too. I also poke holes in the top layer of my pie crust also, just to get the air flowing between the whole pie. Once this is done, toss your pie into the oven on 450 for about 35-40 minutes, however you desire your pie crust to look. After this is done, you're going to take your homemade broth from your chicken that you made, and you're going to add some gravy. I added Great Value chicken gravy, so I'm just going to stir that up until it thickens. And like I said, you can either use regular water to make your gravy, you can do homemade gravy. I chose to do homemade chicken broth and then add gravy into the homemade chicken broth. Once your gravy becomes thickened, you can move on to your next step. And your next step is grabbing an empty